What if the rough white patches on a whale's body aren't signs of disease or neglect, but actually something far more fascinating? Imagine standing at the edge of a boat somewhere in the Pacific Ocean. The water is calm, deep blue, under a cloudless sky, and then suddenly the surface just breaks open. A humpback whale launches itself into the air, 40 tons of living muscle twisting against gravity before crashing back into the sea. In that brief moment of suspension, you notice something strange. The whale's skin isn't smooth and sleek like you'd expect. Instead, it's covered in clusters of rough white growths. Clinging to the head, the flippers, the tail flukes. They look almost like ancient rocks or coral formations, attached to a living creature. These are barnacles. And for centuries, people have looked at them with this mixture of curiosity and concern. Are they hurting the whale? Should we remove them? Why are they even there? Today we're going to answer all of that. And by the end, you'll understand why removing barnacles from a whale is one of the worst things you could possibly do. So let's start with a simple question. What exactly is a barnacle? Most people assume there's some kind of shellfish, maybe a type of mollusk related to snails and clams. But that assumption is completely wrong. Barnacles are crustaceans. They're more closely related to crabs, lobsters, and shrimp than to anything with a spiral shell, which, honestly, makes their appearance even stranger when you think about it. Imagine a crab that builds itself a permanent limestone fortress and never moves again. That's essentially what a barnacle becomes. But they don't start out that way. Not even close. A barnacle begins its life as a tiny, free-swimming larva, just drifting through the ocean currents. At this stage, it looks almost like a microscopic shrimp, complete with legs, antennae, the ability to swim wherever it pleases. For several weeks, this larva floats through the water, feeding on plankton, growing larger. And then comes the critical moment. The larva has to find a permanent home. And here's where it gets interesting. Using specialized sensory organs, it actually searches for the right surface. It tests different textures, different chemicals, looking, essentially, for a place it can survive for the rest of its life. Once it finds somewhere suitable, something remarkable happens. The larva attaches itself headfirst to that surface, and then it secretes a type of natural cement, one of the strongest adhesives found anywhere in nature. Scientists have been studying this cement for decades, hoping to replicate its bonding properties. So far, not easy to beat. Then, the barnacle undergoes a complete transformation. It builds a hard shell around itself made of calcium carbonate plates. It flips its body so its feathery legs now face upward. And for the rest of its life, which can last anywhere from 5 to 20 years, the barnacle uses those legs to sweep food particles from the water passing by. Now, here is where the story becomes truly interesting. Of all the surfaces in the ocean, why would a barnacle choose a whale? The answer reveals just how sophisticated these tiny creatures really are. Think about the ocean from a barnacle's perspective for a second. You need 3 things to survive. A solid surface to attach to, water flowing past you constantly, bringing fresh food, and you need to avoid predators that might pry you off and eat you. A whale checks all 3 of those boxes, and then some. Whale skin turns out to be basically ideal for attachment. It's firm enough to hold the barnacle's cement, but textured enough to give a good grip. The outer layer regenerates constantly, sure, but not so fast that it dislodges barnacles that are already well established. And here's where it gets genuinely interesting. Unlike a rock or a ship hull, a whale moves. It moves constantly. A humpback whale can travel 10,000 miles in a single year, swimming through some of the most nutrient-rich waters on Earth. For a barnacle, that's essentially an all-you-can-eat buffet that never, ever ends. The whale does all the work, swimming through clouds of plankton and microscopic organisms, while the barnacle just extends its feathery legs and collects whatever drifts in. And there's another benefit that I think people don't talk about enough. Whales are warm. Their massive bodies generate serious heat, and that warmth can actually accelerate a barnacle's metabolism and growth rate. Some researchers believe barnacles living on whales grow faster and reach larger sizes than their counterparts stuck on rocks or ship hulls. The whale becomes not just a home, it becomes something like a living paradise. So, from the barnacle's point of view, Attaching to a whale is like winning the evolutionary lottery. Global travel, constant food delivery, warmth, and protection from a whole range of predators who cannot exactly attack something clinging to a 40-ton animal. But, and this is the question that kind of haunts the whole story, what does the whale nibus think about all of this? Because this brings us to one of the most genuinely debated topics in marine biology. Is the relationship between whales and barnacles harmful, helpful, or just neutral? For a long time, scientists assumed barnacles must be parasites. I mean, that's the obvious conclusion, right? They're attached to the whale's body. They're clearly benefiting from the arrangement, so the whale must be losing something in return. But decades of research have actually pushed back hard on that assumption. Start with the physical burden. A single whale can carry hundreds of pounds of barnacles, which honestly sounds like a lot. But remember, a humpback whale weighs about 40 tons. The barnacles represent less than 1% of the whale's total body mass. And studies tracking whale movement have found no measurable difference in swimming efficiency between heavily barnacled whales and those with fewer attachments. The drag created by barnacles appears to be, at that scale, basically negligible. But here's where the story takes a genuinely unexpected turn, because some researchers now think barnacles might actually be helping zoopternotch whales, at least in certain situations. Think about that for a second. Male humpback whales fight each other during mating season. Like, actually fight, ramming their heads together, using their massive bodies as weapons. And those rough, jagged clusters of barnacles? They may act like natural armor, adding protection, and honestly, probably some serious offensive capability to these battles. Imagine being struck by a whale's tail covered in hundreds of sharp-edged shells. It would be like getting hit by a baseball bat wrapped in broken glass. That's not decoration, that's weaponry. And there's more. There's evidence suggesting barnacles may help with thermoregulation in some whale species. Oh, and their presence might actually make whales less appealing to certain parasites that prefer smooth skin. Which, if you think about it, is kind of wild. So where does the science land on all this? The consensus today is that the relationship is primarily commensal, meaning the barnacles benefit, while the whale experiences neither significant harm nor significant benefit. But the possibility of genuine mutual benefit? That's still an active area of research. The question isn't closed. So, if barnacles aren't actually hurting whales, why do people feel so compelled to remove them? This is, and I mean this, perhaps the most important part of the whole story. In recent years, videos have started circulating online. People scraping barnacles off beached or captive whales, and the comments sections fill up instantly with praise for these supposed rescuers. How kind they are, how much better the whale must feel, how satisfying it is to watch those ugly growths come off. But marine biologists watching those same videos, they often react with horror, because removing barnacles from a whale is not rescue. It is harm. Here's what actually happens when you forcibly remove a barnacle from whale skin. And stay with me, because this is the part that really reframes everything. Remember that incredibly strong cement the barnacle produces? That cement doesn't just sit on top of the skin. Over years of attachment, it integrates with the whale's epidermis. The barnacle becomes part of the whale's outer layer. So when you pry one off, you're not removing a foreign object. You're tearing away chunks of the whale's own skin. The wounds left behind are raw and open. And in the ocean, that creates an immediate risk of bacterial and fungal infection. Salt water is not sterile. It's full of microorganisms that can invade damaged tissue. For a healthy whale swimming freely, small wounds from naturally dislodged barnacles heal quickly. But a whale that's already stressed, beached, trapped, immune system already compromised, that's a completely different situation. Massive barnacle removal can lead to systemic infection. We're talking potentially fatal. And here's the thing that really gets me. There are documented cases of well-meaning rescuers causing severe harm to stranded whales specifically by removing barnacles. The stress of the procedure alone can be dangerous. Whales have sensitive skin loaded with nerve endings. The scraping causes pain, real pain. Combined with the already extreme stress of being out of water, That additional trauma can push a whale past its ability to cope. That's why marine mammal rescue organizations now explicitly train their volunteers to leave barnacles alone during rescue operations. The focus has to be on returning the whale to water as quickly as possible, not cosmetic cleaning, not making it look better for the camera. Because once the whale is healthy and swimming again, the barnacles will naturally regulate themselves. Some will fall off. Others will stay. The whale knows how to manage its own passengers. It's been doing it without our help for millions of years. So this brings us to something bigger, something that goes way beyond whales and barnacles. We live in an era where human beings have this unprecedented power to step into natural systems and reshape them. We can dam rivers, clear entire forests, relocate species, engineer whole ecosystems from scratch. And look, most of the time, we're doing it with genuinely good intentions. Nobody's out here trying to make things worse. But good intentions aren't enough. They really aren't. The barnacle-whale relationship has existed for millions of years. Millions. These two organisms evolved together, adapted to each other, and worked out a balance that actually functions for both of them. We didn't design that. We didn't approve it. It just worked itself out long before any of us showed up. And here's the thing. When we look at a whale covered in barnacles and feel that instinct to clean it, what we're really doing is projecting human values onto a system that doesn't run on human values. We see what looks like mess and assume it needs tidying. We see attachment and immediately read it as parasitism. We see something that doesn't match our expectations and conclude that something must have gone wrong. But nature doesn't operate according to human aesthetics. It never has. Here's the part I kept thinking about after I first learned it. Those barnacles on a whale, they're actually telling a story. They record where that whale has traveled, what waters it passed through, how long it has lived. Scientists can study barnacle growth rings, actual growth rings, to learn about whale migration patterns and ocean conditions. Each barnacle is a tiny biological archive attached to a living library. Think about that for a second. So maybe the most important thing we can do when we encounter wildlife is just pause. Before we intervene, before we rush in to fix something, ask whether our help is genuinely needed, or whether we're just uncomfortable with how nature has arranged things. Those are two very different situations, and we don't always stop to tell them apart. The barnacle-whale relationship is a reminder that the connections between species are complex, ancient, and, honestly, usually far more beneficial than they first appear. What looks like a burden might be a partnership. What looks like disease might be adaptation. What looks like a problem that needs solving might be a system that's already in perfect balance. So next time you see footage of a whale breaching, and I mean really look, find those white clusters on its skin. Don't see them as imperfections. Don't see them as some kind of affliction. See them as passengers on an incredible journey. Tiny crustaceans that found their place in the world by hitching a ride on one of the most magnificent creatures this planet has ever produced. They belong there, and the whale knows it, even if we sometimes forget. Thanks so much for watching this exploration of one of the ocean's most fascinating relationships. If you found this interesting, please consider subscribing to the channel. It genuinely helps. A like goes a long way too, getting content like this in front of more people. And I'd really love to hear from you in the comments. Have you ever seen a whale in person? What surprised you most about barnacles? I'm curious what stood out. Until next time, remember that sometimes the best way to help nature is simply to let it be.